right, Mr. Tom. First off, thanks for being here, man. It's always fun talking to you. So I appreciate you taking time out of your busy day to be here. So before we jump into it, for people who may or may not know you, if you want to just kind of give a little bit of a brief background into who you are and kind of maybe what got you into writing, authoring, and something you're really good at is marketing and stuff like that.
Yeah, I'll be relatively brief. My background is actually in the military, so most of my life was spent in the military. I went to West Point, graduated, became an officer, deployed to Iraq. Got the T-shirt. Was a company commander of an airborne unit, my last unit in the Army, and that was around 20, 2012, 2013. And I remember thinking, I don't want to make this a career. It's not really where my head was at. But I was always very fascinated in writing and publishing ever since I was a little kid. And at that time, now we have to kind of put this in a historical context. Back then, I don't know if you remember this, but like blogging was pretty popular, you know? I wouldn't say it was the heyday of blogging, but it was like maybe on the edge of it.
Yeah.
Where blogging was very popular, podcasting was just starting. So I was reading all these blogs like Seth Godin and Stephen Pressfield and lots of different authors and creators and just entrepreneurs, just different stuff like that. I mean, there was a ton. Chris Gullibo at that time was really big. I don't know, all those writers, those creators. I remember thinking, man, there's something to this blogging thing. Like people seem to be able to make lots of money, like writing about stuff and then selling information. And that always made sense to me, like a lot of sense. I'm like, there's no overhead. This seems like something you can do if you can put like a puzzle together, basically. And coming out of the military, I had no real world tangible skills like that were useful to anybody in the real world. Basically, it's like unless I'm going to be running like security for a convoy or something like that in the United States, like no, nobody needs it. So my options were go into middle management and like work at like Frito-Lay's or give this blogging thing a try. So I did. I started a blog, I started a podcast. After I got out of the Army, I got married, and my wife and we traveled around the world, basically did international travel for like a year. Um, and because my thinking was, I just want to take a little bit of time to see if I can make this happen. And my thought was, if it totally bumbles and fails, I will become a very proud Frito-Lay's manager. I'm all in. I'll do it. I'll do it great. But I was like, I got to give this at least a shot. So I just jumped. I just, they say like you jump and then you build the parachute on the way down. Straight up, that's what I did. So from a full-time job, so to speak, to no income coming in, starting effectively from scratch, blogging and podcasting. And then that led to writing and publishing my first book, and then my second and my third. And man, by the end of that first year, let's just put it this way, I made enough, not to replace my income, but enough where I'm like, man, there's something here. And it was enough to like pay for my expenses and for us to justify like another year abroad. So we did that again. And it kind of just started to build from there. So writing and publishing books, which led to me starting a publishing company, which led to people coming to me not wanting to be published, but wanting my help with marketing, because that was kind of the premise of my publishing company was, I mean, anybody can kind of package this stuff and put it together and sell it. And really that's pretty easy. And most people could outsource it and do it themselves. But my premise was I was kind of partnering up with the authors and helping them launch their books. So I got pretty good at that and doing this a lot with a lot of different authors. So then people started coming to me just to market and launch their books. So then I started working with like traditionally published authors like Ash Maurya of Running Lean, Neil Patel. I worked with John Lee Dumas on his crowdfunding campaign where we set a record. And that was a record for a long time for most funded nonfiction publishing project in Kickstarter history. So I really got into the marketing side of things. And longer story, a little bit shorter. Got to the point basically where I was just doing a lot of marketing, publishing and marketing for books and then beyond books, courses, started launching courses, coaching programs, SaaS and software, and everything in between. And it's funny because I did not expect to be in the publishing world for this long. It's just one of those things that gets you and it doesn't let you go. I don't know if you've ever experienced something like that. It's almost like I can't get out of it now. And it's like, and that's okay. It's not a bad thing. It's a good thing. It's like, you just don't expect these things when you get into them, I guess. Like hindsight's 2020 looking back on it. So no complaints, but it's just fascinating because even though I've worked with these bigger companies on software launches, on coaching launches, on courses, and so more on the entrepreneurial and business side, man, the most people follow me for the writing and the publishing stuff still to this day. And so we still have programs for writers and authors. We still basically use the same strategies we use for all these other different types of business and business models for authors. So I'm very much still plugged in. We have a coaching program for authors. We can talk about that. And we're basically always looking for ways to generate new traffic, new subscribers, new readers, and new sales for authors. So that's kind of my life in a nutshell.
Yeah, I like you said where you kind of just jump off the bridge and figure out how to build a parachute on the way down. I am 100% a believer of that. My wife hates this quote because it stresses her out to the max, but it's
Yeah.
the one Tony. I don't know if Tony Robbins came up with it or if he got it from somebody else, but it's like if you want to take the island, you burn your boats because it's like
Mm.
when people have plan B. I'm not saying don't have a plan B. Okay, it's just not me. But it's like when you have a plan B, C, D, it's like it's a lot easier to take the foot off the gas and kind of lay back on what's comfortable, and it keeps you from actually going full in on what you wanted to do, like with this blogging and podcasting, um, which seems like it ended up, turning out just fine because here you
Yep.
are and you're
Yep.
not at Frito Lay's right now. So I assumed it all worked out.
It did.
So yeah, that's a super cool story to hear. So we were talking a little bit off air, so I think this will be a fun conversation about obviously you're big into marketing. Marketing and list building for authors is what I focus on. And the big question for authors is like, hey, how do I sell more books? How do I get in front of more people? How do I grow my audience? And you were mentioning a couple of things that were kind of new to me in terms of how you approach and how you think of things is when people think social media, right? And they're like, their first thought is, okay, social media means I have to be an influencer. I have to post all these videos, all this content, be engaging, grow I want thousands of followers and millions of followers. And you are basically saying, especially when we're talking about authors, it's like you're thinking about it wrong. So it's like you're probably doing it wrong. And it's if that's the approach you're taking, it's probably never going to happen. You're going to burn all this time and money trying to figure it out. So I'm curious, that's the way most people think when it comes to social media. What do you I already know the answer because I asked about it before we started recording, but like what would you recommend to people? Like how would you effectively use social media and maybe use that as a stepping stone to something that actually provides more ROI, not only short term but long term.
Yeah. So let's just establish like what would I think everybody listening to this, every author has probably heard and understands is like the proper mode of being when it comes to social media. What is social media? Well, I mean, let's not get into the irony of what it's called and all that. Let's just say for what it is, social media, it's a platform, it's a way to connect and engage with people. And obviously, again, I was kind of at the forefront of all these platforms, like Facebook when it came out to colleges other than Harvard or whatever, boom, on it. I got to go through the rise and fall of all these different platforms. I'm not saying Facebook has, but Google Plus, going back longer. There's all sorts of ones that came and went. And there's always new stuff coming out. But without going into too much historical context for this, at at certain points in time, certain things can be used in certain ways to help you achieve certain goals. I think there was a time where social media made a lot of sense because you didn't have to pay for it. You could quickly connect with people and you could put stuff out there that would get organic reach. Those days are over. So there's no such thing as organic reach on social media anymore. You have to pay to play, even to your followers. So like if I want to reach my 4,000 friends on Facebook, it's like I got to pay. There's that's it. That's the deal. You look at it's the same thing on every platform. It's pay to play. That has happened over the last 5 years or so. So the problem is what I'm getting at is a lot of people still today have this idea that they should be using social media the way that people were using it 5 years ago or 7 years ago or 10 years ago, which is as if it's a good place to build an audience, which I think it's the worst. I think it's the absolute worst. Like I'm going to go build an audience on a platform that I don't own where somebody else can direct people's eyeballs basically anywhere else at all times. and I have no control over how I reach them and how I like what can actually be sent. And at random times, I could be blocked from even being able to reach them. Thanks, I'll pass. So that's my premise coming from this. Just as you can hear, I'm a little jaded by it, I guess you could say. But I believe that's the case. And I think, and I work with a lot of authors, hundreds, and almost all of them have social media. So this is not uncommon. And then you look at their social media and you're like, oh, okay, cool. There's 1,000 people that follow you on Instagram. That's great. Or like, oh, look at that. You got 5,000 friends on Facebook. Fantastic. Or maybe somebody's like, oh, 20,000, I don't know, people on Pinterest. I mean, honestly, maybe even there's a little bit more value. Who knows? But on the typical ones, Instagram, Facebook, whatever, TikTok, it's a cool. You got some people. But then let's look at this. You're now building an audience on these platforms, which means you're publishing content on them. To build an audience where there's any level of engagement, like so if I talked about that person, hypothetical author, but these are real authors I'm talking about, with 1,000 people on Instagram, and they post and this author gets 15 hearts. What is the value here to said author? It's to build engagement. It's for people to know, like, and trust you. What is it? I don't see it, frankly. I don't see any point in it, like almost at all, to be publishing content on these platforms, with very, very rare exceptions for a specific tactic or specific strategy you're trying to do. But in terms of the higher level, this is what you should be doing these platforms, which is here's the traditional strategy: build an audience, grow an audience on these platforms, then monetize said audience. But again, what I'm telling you is it's harder than ever to actually get a following. It's harder than ever to actually reach that following without having to pay to play. And you're an author, which means you're selling something with a very low margin. Okay. Now, if you're a coach or you're selling coaching or consulting or high ticket stuff, go for it, because you know what? A less than 1% conversion rate might actually pay you. It might actually put money in your pocket. But a less than 1% conversion rate when you're trying to sling books that are 99 cents to $10, just do the math. Okay. I'll save you the problem of doing the math. Here's what it equates to. You don't make any money from these platforms. So now all of a sudden you have authors who are what I describe as trying to become influencers, which is trying to build a following and just like be able to share opinions and thoughts and get people to buy their books. Let me summarize this and say, what a waste of time. You could do almost anything else with your time and probably achieve better results. Because I read a report recently. Oh gosh, I wish I had it in front of me. It was, what's the longevity of content? And it was like, podcast or blog was like at the top, and it's like it lasts for like 6 months or something like that, right? That's like the long end. But then you go down the social media, it's like Facebook post is like a minute. You go down to TikTok, it's like 3 seconds. It's this ever evaporating attention that you're playing the game of attention. And most authors aren't good at that game. You write books, they're long form, and you're trying to compete in a world that's all about attention grabbing, short form, frivolous content that's completely fleeting. It's like, and then the only way to succeed then, if you're playing both those games, is you have to put as much effort into the writing as you do into the TikToking. And so this is the thing. And every author I talk to, when I share it with them this way, it's like, they're like, yes, I hate this. I don't want to be a TikToker. I didn't sign up to be a TikToker, but here I am trying to TikTok. And it's like, yeah, don't do that. Let the influencers do that, and you be an author. So I say all that, and Philip, please jump in if you want to. If I'm riffing and I'm going and you feel good about it, let's go.
Keep going, man.
All right. So then I say all that, like, I don't think anybody can challenge me on any of those points. And I'd be honestly willing to have a conversation. Like, I'm agnostic about all these things, about the platform you should be selling on and where you should be marketing on. Do I use Amazon? Do I sell from my own site? All these things, I'm agnostic. It's like whatever puts money in your pocket as an author, like just do that. But let's do it efficiently, and let's do it so you don't like hate it by the end of it, because you're doing more of the TikToking than you are the actual writing, which is why you signed up. So with all that said, then my approach then to social media, especially how it's evolved in the last few years, which is as effectively, I think I did a YouTube video in like 2018 talking about the pay to play Ponzi scheme that is social media. It turns out to be very true. Still more true today than it was when I first researched and wrote and published that video and that article. But like, so now today it's like, why would I spend an extra minute on a platform that I can't control that gives me almost zero results? But there is value in social media. Again, I'm not gonna completely crap on it. Here's the value in it. The value is people are on it, right? Obvious. That's the obvious truth. There are people on it. There are people who are on Instagram every day. There are people who are on Instagram for hours a day. Okay. So we know the likelihood that your readers are going to be on one of these platforms, depending on what you write. Certain age groups, certain demographics are on these platforms. They're on Instagram, they're on Facebook, they're on TikTok, whatever. Okay. So we know they're on there. What should we be doing? Should we spend time on a post to our 1,000 followers that gets 10 likes, 10 hearts? No, I don't think so. I think even that, if you were able to even do that in like half an hour, like even if you were able to do that in like 20 minutes, I almost think there's almost anything else you could do, you could spend that 20 minutes on that would be more fruitful for you. So I would say stop doing that. My proposition and my strategy for the authors we work with is we don't use social media the way people tell you to use social media. We use it as a search engine because people are on there, they're logged into Instagram, they will search things. You want to be able to be found. So when you're found on something like Instagram, I want you to have a presence there, but I don't need you posting all the time. Post 3 posts and just leave it be, let it go. Or post 6 posts or post 9. Sometimes we'll do 9 and we have like this kind of grid system. So it looks like a cool big picture. And that's it. It's like a billboard. Boom, published, walk away, don't engage anymore on Instagram. Or if you want to, you engage with the with the with the tools that these platforms provide that are getting the extra sauce, the extra juice from the platform because they're trying to promote them, like shorts and what is it, Reels? Is it Instagram Reels?
Is it Facebook Reels? I don't
Facebook.
know,
Okay,
man.
okay, that's right. So bear with me that I don't know the technical terms here, but it's the shorts, the Reels, the whatever, the short form video content that's being pushed by everybody. Okay, take advantage of that. You can do that if you want. If you want to share a post and update, do it using that. That doesn't interfere, say, in Instagram with your 9 grid billboard that you end up just that's just there as if it's just a landing page. So I treat all this stuff like it's a landing page that then send people where? To my website, where I can get their email address, where Philip, where people actually will convert. People will buy things from an email. Like the conversion rate I have on email is like 10% or more. It's like every subscriber I get is worth money to me in an abstract sense. Some are worth a lot of money, some aren't worth at all. But like again, in an abstract sense, because there's real conversion rates. With a list of 1,000 people, I should be making a good 5-figure income from my writing. So, but that's just from an email list. So everything else I think should be serving that function or trying to get them just go buy a book directly. But my preference would be we build the email list and we sell from there. And everything else just leads people back to what we know makes money, which is email, which you control. Somebody can't shut off. When your emails are sent out, it's not like your email service provider is plugging everybody else's newsletter in your newsletter and giving them a million other things to take their attention away from you. Email still works. I don't know if it's ever been dead or anybody's said it's been dead. I know I've been doing this for 10 years. And I think back then people would still kind of say those kind of things, but I don't know how much of that was just advertising and marketing. Like, hey, let's be contrarian. But like my experience, these emails never been dead. It's just as good as it's ever been. If you're attracting the right people and you're putting out decent quality content on your newsletter and through your emails, that's where the time should be spent. That partly, and then I think partly on how do we get more traffic to that sign up page, to that newsletter sign up, to that lead magnet, whatever it is. Outside of writing, to me, that's where you're, as an author, as a fiction author, your greatest value is to do that, to focus on those 2 things. Does that make sense?
Yeah, and obviously I'm a big proponent of this is email list and finding any and every way possible to get not just to get people on your list, but what's more important than getting people on your list is getting the right people on your list,
Yes.
right? And you can speak more to this is I have conversations with authors all the time. They're like, "Oh, I'm like, oh, do you have an email list or like when did you start it? How many people are on there?" Like, "Oh, well, I got 50 people. I got some cousins and mom and dad, and I got like 15 Facebook friends." I'm like, "Okay." Ask what genre you write in. Do you know if any of these people are actually reading your genre? Are they the right fit for? They're like, well, I don't really know. I'm like, okay. So the main problem is not just getting people on your list, but getting the right people. And that's where all of the ROI, if we're
Yes.
talking making sales and just longevity as an author, like the ROI is in your list, but it's also in making sure you're cultivating it with the right people, or it's going to be all this almost like when you're playing with social media, all this effort for basically nothing in return, right? And
Yes.
that's try to avoid a bunch of effort where your ROI is going to be virtually nothing because you're just going to be so frustrated all the time.
Yeah. And so I would say like the other thing I would tie into this, and then we can kind of go wherever you want with this. I completely agree with everything you're saying. And I wrote down right people on list. It's like, so then there's the question. It's like if you're gonna, it's like in a math equation, if like there's one variable I need to solve for, which is the critical variable, well, there it is. How do I get the right people onto my email list so that I can communicate with them when and how I want, and through a medium that affords you the ability to actually effectively sell, whereas social media does not. Like all these things like really do not. But email does. Like people will read emails, click a link, go buy a thing through an email. Social media, the percentages are about 1/10 or less, right? So how do I get the right people? So the combination of this is that what I'm also not saying is like, let's go and blog for the rest of our lives. Because I also know not blogging is not as popular as it used to be either. I think there's value in blogging still. I think there's value in the SEO that comes from that to a degree. And I think there's value in having content that people can come to and read and see and be like, oh, I like the cut of his jib. I'm going to sign up for his list, you know? Um, that's fine. But I would say like I'm also, I guess you either what is the term? I kind of want to say lazy, but I'm not lazy because I actually work really hard at things, but I'm kind of lazy in the concept of like, I don't want to do unnecessary work. I'm not big on that. Like if I can see a way to do something faster or better, like my mind goes to that. Like I'm gonna go try to do this better and faster, or I could go do this thing manually, or maybe I could spend a little bit longer on it and build a system so that it's just automated. Like that's how I process things. I think if there's something to be done, how can I do it as efficiently as possible now and across time? So with that being said, what I look for is the fastest path, in my opinion, right now to get readers that you're looking for is through kind of author collaboration is one of the top strategies we use right now. And and I know you know this. So I'm not, and again, there's nothing new under the sun. So I'm not preaching anything special or whatever. It's just kind of, it's more like how you do it. It's like the strategy, everybody can see the strategy clearly is what's effective, but it's how do you do it, right? How do you make it work? So we'll just high level, I think it's these author collaborations where if you can get, say, 10 other people in your genre, and you can be what Seth Godin, a little action figure I have back here. There he is. What's called like the impresario, the person that brings people together. Be that person. Be the author that brings other authors together, and be the hub because you benefit from being the hub and being the focal point and sending all the traffic to you. And then you can do, there's lots of ways to carve this up. I know a lot of authors are probably used to this kind of concept. So I'm just going to talk high level the way we organize author collaborations. 10 people, same genre, similar books that are complementary. Put them all together on a page. Do one limited time event where people promote before and during the event. So waiting lists until it goes live. Build your email list, goes live. You can have it live. People can go click and buy. And you also have a very obvious way to get on this list for more deals like this and for more books like this. That's it. Then the other benefit you get to this, not only do you build your email list, not only are you sending useful traffic to your website, because anybody clicking on those other authors' links about this bundle, if you're doing any ads, which is most authors I know probably are not, but if you are pixeled, you can then retarget that specific traffic, and that's useful. It's extremely useful because you know they're all coming from the right source because they're interested in this bundle of books in the genre you write, right? And now you can retarget, you're building the list, you're getting sales. And if you're an Amazon affiliate, this is just icing on the cake. I make sure everything's an affiliate link. Why would I not? So now all of a sudden it's like you don't make much on that one or two book sale. Say I get 100 or, and some of the authors we do this with is like, let's say they'll get like 300 or 400 sales themselves, but they'll also generate like 300 or 400 sales for the other authors in the group. So let's say they get 1,000 sales out of this group of books because they're using their affiliate link. That's 1,000 commissions that they get, and whatever else that person goes and buys over the next 24 hours, which is the Amazon affiliate system. One of my favorite things. It's so easy. Like if I'm linking to Amazon, for sure I'm using my affiliate link because people will go and buy like tuna subscriptions and it's like, sweet, like bring it on, or go buy a TV. It's like, yes, good job, and you might as well just benefit from that. So that's just a little way to like, again, because the emphasis here is we want you to be a successful author. We want you to make money from your fiction. But I'll tell you what, and this is what I always ask authors. I'm like, does your money have to come from sales of your books? Or would you be okay if the money came from like some other random source? And 99% of the time, it's like, I don't care where it comes from. And that's why I say I'm money agnostic. I don't care where the money comes from. If the book gets me 1% of the sales, but I get 99% of the sales because of what I'm doing to promote that book, then do that all day long, right? So I'm just saying, if you can overlay, you making the book sales, you're making the commissions on top of that, all these benefits that you can accrue from this and additional revenue streams you can create, why not? And again, that to me is your best effort is like sending an email to someone who might be an author in your genre. Better use of 20 minutes than posting on social media. I would believe that all day long, at least right now. I won't say for the rest of my life because these things can change. Well, right now, 100% way more profitable for you than doing another post that's going to be ignored by 99% of your audience on social media.
Yeah, that's right. And I think a lot of people do have like 1,000 things running through my head now. It's like I think a lot of people don't understand, like, even if you have 1,000 followers or friends on Facebook, like when you post something, Facebook doesn't show that to everybody, even though they're your followers. You think it's like you would just imagine it goes to everybody. But like with an email list, like if you know your open rate's 40%, like if you have 1,000 people, then in theory, you know, at least 400 people are going to see that open and see that email if you know your stats and stuff like that, which you should know your stats if you have an email list. Social media is not that way, right? Like they a very limited amount of people, doesn't matter if they're in your world or not, they still don't show it, which is where the whole, like you said, pay to play win or paid to play comes into effect, because it's like they want you to have to go spend money on ads and sink
Yep.
money into their platform because that's how they get rich. um
Yep.
and then another point you made, you were saying like you're money agnostic, which is a really cool way to think of it, is like I find it a lot of times this isn't an author's mindset, especially when we're talking fiction, is
Yeah.
having like a business mindset to it. Like I'm not saying go start a business and be an entrepreneur. That's not what I'm saying. But like if you can have a business mindset to your book marketing and wanting this to be a long-term successful thing, I think that can only be beneficial. Kind of like you're saying, like, do you care where the money comes from? If it's from you selling 1,000 books or you selling 100 books, but then you make the same amount or more money from maybe this other avenue or two other
Yeah.
avenues or something like that. Like I don't see one person who would say, "Oh, I want it all to come from my books," or "I don't want any money at all." Like that would just be
Right.
silly. So I think having that business mindset and kind of the things you were talking about makes a whole lot of sense. So yeah, those were some really great points you just made.
Yeah. I mean, it's and again, my heart goes out to all those authors who struggled, because I mean, I interact with them, I work with them, I see it all the time. And so yeah, just know that I hope I'm not coming off like too negative on this, but I'm just trying to be real with people. Every now and then you need a drill sergeant just like slap you in the face, and
That's right.
so that's my responsibility right now for this. But I just think there's just so many more useful endeavors for your time. And there's ways to use these platforms. And again, this stuff can change. But it's like right now, just don't you shouldn't be using strategies that work like 5 or 10 years ago. Also, just be cautious of like using strategies that like very clearly work for things like coaching, but like you don't want to be a coach. If you don't want to be a coach, don't be a coach. Like if you don't want to be selling courses, don't sell courses. Like you don't have to be hamstrung into these things. Like we work with the way we work with fiction authors, and we help them generate hundreds, thousands of sales using these kind of techniques. And that's just one of them. But by streamlining and doing less of the things that don't actually move the needle and doing more of the things that help them move the needle, and not only now, but across time. Again, if you're a fiction author, then you want to write fiction. And so you should be writing fiction. You probably should be writing lots of books. You can't just write one book and hope it's like Ulysses or something. I don't know,
Good
or
luck.
whatever it is, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's not a strategy. Like that's a wish.
Yeah.
And that's cool. You can have wishes too. But for those of us who are concerned about strategy and just being effective with our time and making back some sort of return on the time invested to write a book, because it's not easy. It can be quite painful. Um, it could take months or years. I want authors to be successful. And it's like, if there's something I can help you avoid doing that's wasting your time, I would be, broadly speaking, social media. And and then with that said too, do feel free to leverage other people's social media channels. Like just go connect with the influencer who has a big following and is constantly engaging and asked her or him to post about your book. We do that all day long. And if you're not going after these huge influencers who have agents and stuff like that, these what they call micro influencers, it's like, and you're better off doing that. 500,000 people that follow them, but they're getting like hundreds of engagements on a post. I mean, that's it. You can drive so many real sales from that. So I still leverage social media in that capacity by having influential people promote or share my books or products or whatever we're selling. Although the optimal thing, of course, as you can probably backtrack and understand, would be them emailing their list about it. Ultimately, that would be the best. But I'm just saying there is a place. There are things about social media you can use. Don't feel like I'm just going to delete my social media and move away. I think use it as a landing page, have it on there, have some sort of presence. If you want, I also think for a lot of authors, it wouldn't hurt them if they had no presence at all, frankly. Like, I mean, you tell me, like, if you're an author and you're not sure if that's true or you're offended by that, it's like, I would just say, like, show me your stats, like, show me what it's producing, see if you can measure it at all and how much time you put into it. And my gut would tell me, and my experience would tell me that most have no idea the amount of effort they put into these things and the limited return they get from any of it.
Yeah, I just first off, this is something I was going to mention earlier when you were talking. Is you're talking about finding strategies and systems that work, but like just because it worked 5, 7, 10 years ago doesn't mean it works today. But also, I'm of the mindset is simplicity scales. Like,
Yes.
there's no need to make this complex, multi-functional system that's like, I'm reinventing the wheel just because I want to be the person that did something cool. But it's like, or would I rather go find what works? I see it works for other people. It's really simple, something I can manage myself that's not going to eat up all my time. I'm not going to be miserable doing it. And then you just put your effort into that. That's what scales up, which is where I believe an email list is so important. And like you were talking about author collaborations, which it's exactly what I do for myself and what I do for my clients. Like, go find these authors. And like we were talking about, they have to be the right people. I write fast paced thrillers. I'm not going to go partner up with 10 contemporary romance authors and it makes sense, right? Like, if
Bingo.
I do get 1,000 people, I'll probably get 1,000 unsubs.
Correct.
So it's like finding those right people, whether it's through social media. I'm not big on social media, or if it's through other platforms. Like, I use things like Story Origin and Book Funnel because it's where these authors already are. So it's really easy to find them and collaborate with them with basically minimal effort. Um, but that's where the ROI is going to come through. So like, here's a question. If I was an author and I'm like, hey, I want to make, I want to sell more books. I'm a fiction author. I'm having trouble selling books and stuff like that. Like, I'm coming to you for one, like, if I'm coming to you for one thing to sell more books, like, where are you going to lead me first? Like, this is the best avenue to take you if we're looking at getting more book sales and growing your audience and stuff like that. Like, where are you going to focus that author?
Do
Maybe
we
it's a
have
loaded
context
question.
of like what they have established and kind of where they are at?
Let's say there's somebody that's got like five or more books, and they've either haven't tried to sell more books, or they haven't figured out how to do it yet. Maybe they're thinking about going and starting ads and stuff like that, but they don't know where to start. But they have the catalog to where they should be making sales and seeing a positive ROI at some point. Like,
Yeah.
where would you lead that person?
Yeah. So I'll go a little before that. I would just evaluate the author first and look at the books. Because sometimes like we have to go with the assumption that the books have been bought and there's a decent amount of reviews and positive reviews. I think if you're not at that point where you have like a decent amount of positive reviews, I'd probably just focus there like first. Like, let's just get like 10 or 20 positive reviews. Like, if you're just from scratch. Obviously I prefer a lot more than that, but you need to have some proof on, especially if we're using Amazon, we need to have some social proof, and that will help all the things later on in terms of conversion and stuff like that. If we're averaging like an over four star, 4.5 star on our reviews, and we got some good positive reviews going that are legit and set you up for success. So I would do more of like an audit of the author and the books themselves. How does the Amazon page look? What are the short things we can tweak the simple things we can tweak right away that can actually have an impact? Categories, big C, categories, small c, like keywords, big K, keywords, small k, if you will, that kind of thing. The SEO of that piece. But let's say all that stuff's in place and they're just not really getting great sales. Again, I would still look at things I can do like within my book to like link to other books of mine if we're not already doing that. So again, just setting up the system where when a sale comes through, it should result in more sales. So if we have 5 books and it's a series or something like that, I want I want the lifetime value of my reader to increase because I've strategically put in place a sequence, or I have the right approach even within the book when they're reading it to get to the next book or buy the series or whatever it is, right? So those are kind of more like I'll almost say admin type things, like just set these things and get these things straight. Then as far as like generating the traffic, frankly, it's been working so well for us. We either do an author collaboration or an influencer marketing campaign. So where we're either again teaming up with 5, 10 authors in the same genre, and we're all promoting to a same landing page. And again, with the authors we work with, we have them create a landing page on their site. It's a waiting list before it goes live. They're collecting email addresses. When it goes live, again, they're either collecting email addresses and then letting people go through to click on these books, or it might be open, but they still have a way to kind of connect and sign up for this list and get notified of new deals. To me, that's the fastest path. Fastest path. Then influencer marketing. The only difference here is instead of other authors promoting us, we go to find influential people to share our book. And this is underutilized. Like I think the author collaboration is great because I feel like it's almost an infinite well. If you're connecting with the right people, you can kind of just keep rotating authors through and stuff like that and just kind of keep going. Like who's going to really reach the depth of that? I think you could do that for a while. You can make that your sole strategy for the next 12 months and you'll probably be good. But then I would say like, okay, what I would overlay that with or go to next or do simultaneously if you can multitask is get influential people to share the book. And I'm not just talking about people like I write what you said or cozy romance. I'm not talking about going to a cozy romance review site and having them email that could work.
Yeah.
I'm actually more of the mindset of how do we get off the beaten track people to write about this. So I'll give you an example. One of the authors we work with, I'm going to butcher this because there is a term for this, but he writes stories with where one of the main characters is a dog, and it's a big trope. So or it's a big it's big. There's like whole people listening to this will be like, well, yeah, it's called this, Tom. It's like,
Yeah, like of course, Tom, come on.
yeah, come on, but you get the idea,
Yeah.
okay? So, but the point is with him, it was like, let's get who's interested in dogs and who's interested in stories about dogs. I don't have to just go to like the low hanging or the obvious thing is go to that genre and book review sites and things like that. Okay, go one step deeper or farther out, tertiary markets, if you will, and you could say, well, what about dog rescue? What about just dog enthusiast blogs and podcasts? What about just anybody talking about dogs or specific breeds? Like maybe you can just get a PS plug in one of these emails. Hey, here's a great book. You're a dog lover. You're on this list. This list dedicated to like dog bones. It's like, here's a great book that you'll love with a character starring XYZ. So that's the kind of stuff I like to do because nobody's doing that. Like almost nobody does that because they don't think it's going to be worth their time or effort, or they just don't know. I don't know. I don't know why. That is, I think it takes like an extra, like you have to kind of connect the dots a couple times to get there and to frame it as such for that person who has an email list to plug a book like that when they're not a book site, they're not a book review site. But I can't tell you how many times like this actually ends up being extremely successful and even lucrative for these authors because those lists usually aren't being sold books. So now all of a sudden, if they get an endorsement or a testimonial from somebody who cares about dogs and is like, here's this book by this author that loves dogs and it's got a dog in it, boom. And you could do this all day long for any niche. You just have to be creative. Some are not as easy to do as others. So I'm not going to get into that. For the exceptions to the rule, listen, go find another strategy. Like go do the author collaboration, go do something else. But if you're not sure if this could work for you, it probably could, honestly. It work for probably 90% of genres we work in, except for the very extremely obscure or slightly questionable, we'll say, in terms of content. Okay, so but otherwise, depending on what you're writing, you can make this work. You can do it for kids' books. We've done it for romance, historical fiction, easy. Come on, there's so many that are just like should be obvious, but if they're not, well, I mean, that's why we should work together. But yeah, you get the idea.
Yeah. You mentioned something. Oh, so when I asked that question, I was actually kind of hoping you answered it the way you were answering it. I asked you, hey, somebody with 5 books not making sales, like, what do you do? I think a lot of authors, just from my experience with talking to authors and having conversations and stuff like that, it's like, hey, my book's not selling. I got 20 books, I got 10 books, I don't understand. It's like there's not this like connection of the dots like you were talking about where it's like, okay, it's awesome that you have 10 books or 20 books. Okay. And let's say your 10 books is an entire series. That's even better. But what if your covers aren't good? What if your blurb sucks? What if you don't have reviews? What if you have reviews and they're not
Exactly.
good? Like
Exactly.
there's these too many, like you were mentioning, like there's too many things that have to be in place that I think authors oftentimes, and I'm speaking very broadly here, so I'm not like if you're reading this and like I'm not or listening, I'm not trying to offend anybody.
Mhm.
From my experience, like me myself is like it's easy not to think of like all these things that have to connect, and you have to start. You have to have a good book. Then you have to have a good cover. The title has to make sense. Then your description needs to be good. Then you need to have reviews. You have to have professional edit. Like if one thing is off, in my experience, it can just stop the whole thing in its tracks. So it's
Yeah.
like spend the time, and it might feel overwhelming and you'll get used to it and better at it as you do it more, but like spend the time getting those pieces right. And then when it comes to marketing and trying to sell your books, I think it becomes an easier process, right? You think so?
Yeah. 100%. 100%.
Yeah.
And yeah, and that's the double-edged sword of like self-publishing is it gives you so much freedom to do whatever you want, and then it gives you so much freedom to do whatever you want. And it's like, I'm not saying you need a publisher. I'm not saying anything like that. But I know as a creative person myself and somebody who loves to write and I love the nature of fiction and these kind of things. And I know even me myself with also having the business mind and the publisher mind, and that's kind of how I think it's still very easy for me to get wrapped up thinking that my ideas are the best and like my way or my thing is the best. Like, and that's especially true for like book covers for a lot of authors. Like they're really attached to them. And it's like
Big time.
you just gotta step back and you gotta let somebody who knows what they're doing design that cover for that genre. You know what I mean? Like you just gotta let it go. Let it go. Or you maybe the subtitles gotta be updated or the description or and you can even get. I'm not even getting into the content because I do think just like a publisher and marketer in a way, or the marketer. So I'm just looking at like the shiny surface stuff. That's like the immediate stop. I'm not even getting into the content. That's probably even harder to let go for some
Yeah.
authors. I'm not going to get into that. I'm just talking about the surface level stuff. I agree with you 100%. A bad cover can stop a book. There are exceptions. Like I like to give as an example, like have you ever seen the original like Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy cover?
No,
It's
is it
just
bad?
awful. It's just terrible. Okay, so there's exceptions to the rule. Like everybody's gonna go search this now.
How big is that book though?
Yes.
Right?
So and there's exceptions to the rule, but the reality is in this day and time, again, kind of coming back to that we're in the TikTok generation. People's attention span is like 3 seconds. And you can say all day long, don't judge a book by its cover, but that's the purpose of a cover. It's so that people can judge it. So just make sure you're setting yourself up to be judged correctly for the type of book you're trying to write.
Yeah, I agree with that completely. So I got one more question for you. This is selfishly kind of a question because I'm curious of the answer for you since you've been doing this for so long and you have so much experience with it. Um, is we're talking about well, let's focus on like your email list and you're selling your book. Like how often, in your opinion, should you be emailing your list and how often in those emails should you be pitching people to buy your book? So I feel like this answer could vary vastly depending on who you ask. So I'm
Well,
curious in the West Point mind of Tom Morkes, what you're thinking.
well, then it's you got to practice what I preach and not what I do, right? Because I think you're on my list, and you got my first email, my
I
first
said,
email in
dude,
a
where are you
year.
doing? Yeah.
So like, yeah, it's funny because it's been a year, and I am like, I need to email my list, or I need to delete this list.
Yeah.
So I'm re-engaging and trying to get back more consistent, which it's hard. It's hard when you're busy, but so here's the optimal thing. I think the optimal thing, and this is why I'm saying do what I say, not what I do here personally. But I think when I was experiencing my most consistent sales and results of like my own books and stuff like that, it was when I was consistent and it was generally consistent. So like if if you can do one a month, then do one a month. If you could do one email a week or every 2 weeks, do it every 2 weeks. If you can do it once a week, do once a week. If you can do an email every day and in such a way that like people want to stay on that list, like do it, but don't feel like somehow. But I think that's the thing. It's like you can kind of intuitively. So this is a personal intuition. Like, can you do daily? It's like, no, then don't do it. Can you do weekly? If yes, and it's not like killing you, then do it. I'm kind of the mindset right now where I'm trying to get back into weekly and just even realizing I'm like, monthly might be the thing for me, but I'm going to play it by year. But the big thing is consistency. And then also what people can kind of expect, like in terms of, so I mentioned Seth Godin, obviously he writes nonfiction and he writes daily emails. I don't know how, I don't know that that can be cross applied to many other people. Like I'm not sure many other people can succeed with that strategy. So I wouldn't encourage it, but sign up for his list and just see what he does. He like, he's his like newsletters like Seinfeld episodes, it's like,
Oh, that sounds fun.
and it's
Yeah.
just like random. It's like random ideas he has. And it's like, yeah. So you could do it that way. Another one I really like is Stephen Pressfield, who writes fiction and nonfiction. And so you could see kind of how he does it, where he does like this writing Wednesday type of thing. But the point I'm trying to make, if you just kind of sign up for some of these newsletters or sign up for the other ones you've seen, get a sense of like kind of what they're doing and how they do it and what's appealing or not to you. I think that's the best thing you can do, because I think everybody fails when they try to like force themselves into a box. I think that's what happens with the social media thing. It's like, well, I have to be an influencer now. So now you have all these authors trying to be influencers, and it's like, no, you're not. Like that's not who you are. You write books, you write great stories. You're not, you're not just slinging ideas like in 5-second format. But for email, you can put a little bit more time and effort and thought into it, and you can think about what could be a consistent framework. So is it a writing Wednesdays type of thing? Is it a Monday musings? Is it every 2 weeks, the first and second Tuesday of the month or something like that? And so get consistent with when you publish, and ideally you have some consistency with what is actually published. That's my system's way of thinking about it. Consistency in schedule and publishing, and consistency in style of content. So people aren't like, it's not confusing like email to email. They kind of know what to expect. I think that's the optimal. I will also say that well, that's the best. I think you got to do that. And I think it would help if you have an autoresponder and you have some things that are just automatically going out over the course of however long. Um, when I wrote the complete guide to pay what you want pricing after I did the launch and made like $1,000 in like the first weekend or something like that, and it was like no more sales. I was like, okay, I got to do something because I'm unemployed now, and this is supposed to pay for my plane ticket home. So I created a course, a free course for it, which is just effectively an email sequence, just a series of like 7 emails. And I still get sales every week to this day. I get a paycheck from Gumroad because I sell it through Gumroad every week for like since I don't know, whenever I published that years ago. So what I'm saying is you can set that stuff up later too. So, and this works for fiction. Does nonfiction, you can see the obvious path, but for fiction, it's the same deal. Have somebody sign up and put them through a sequence where it drips out content that readers of that genre would enjoy. And one of the easiest hacks, I think, is a lot of authors are like, oh, for my lead magnet, I'm going to give away this book of mine that nobody knows or cares about. That can work. But alternatively, I would say a better lead magnet that we see higher conversion rates on would be like if you're in a genre, like let's say you write historical fiction, the lead magnet I would create would be my top 10 or top 20 underrated historical fiction novels. And guess where I'd put my books? I plug them into that list. But
Okay.
I'd also shine light on other people's books. So I'm shining the spotlight on other authors that I like, other books in the genre, but I'm strategically placing my own books in there as well. So it's like, here's, because I mentioned Stephen Pressfield, this and that. And then I plug mine's number 5 or something like that. But the point is people are going to want to know what are the top 10 underrated historical fiction books that you must read? Or you know what I mean? Like, so it's a hook. And the only person who's going to be signing up for that is somebody interested in that genre. So I would encourage people who are use that, because I don't think the market's so saturated in that. Like I tell my students to do that kind of. And frankly, there's just not enough authors like doing this already. So I just say, take this and freely steal this idea, because I'd be interested in it. If I'm interested in like a book, like I don't read much fiction anymore. I just don't have as much time. But one of the last books I read was like Wool, I think. And it was like a short story. And I think it's been turned into a Apple series or something like that. But it was like, but if somebody's like short sci-fi books that are like Wool, like top 10 short sci-fi books like Wool, I'd be like, oh, let me download that and see if there's a book I might like on there. They're on your list now. You can make every single one of those links an affiliate link. You can plug your book into that. And then you can have a drip sequence that goes out, either talking about these books or what you like about it or what makes a captivating book, but then also kind of feeds it back into the books you write. Again, Stephen Pressfield, great example when he's writing his fiction and releasing his fiction. He talks about like how he came up with the characters or how he came up with the story or how he did research for X, Y, or Z. Almost any author in any genre can do this in some form or fashion. And you bring in the real world into the fiction that you're doing. And it makes it so you have great content ideas that you can kind of drip out. And they're kind of indirect ways of promoting your book in an email sequence format. So it's not just here's my new book, buy it, but it's here's a story about like this kind of character or this kind of archetype or this thing. And again, not getting into I'm going to become, you have to become like a teacher or coach of writing. That's not the point. It's just share. If I'm interested in an author, and you should be trying to build an email list of, I know this sounds corny, but raving fans. You really should, like the person who buys all your books, because the person who buys all your books just wants to hear from you and wants to know what your insight is and what your process is and wants to go inside your brain. Like there's a whole parasocial thing that's happened with this like social media and stuff like that. People just want to know what's new with your life. So share a little bit of that. Like be personable, share behind the scenes. There's a million things authors can write about, fiction authors can write about that are indirectly or directly tied to their books and that their raving fans will be interested in reading. So I hope that helps.
Dude, I've never heard that idea for fiction. The like
Mm.
list of books, like most underrated, top 10 underrated. Like I just always assume, and it's what I use for myself and clients, is like a piece of your writing. So now I am literally gonna go test and see
Do it.
conversion rates for like I do military thrillers. So maybe I could think of something like,
Boom.
maybe like
Tom
top 10.
Clancy.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. Top 10 military thrillers like Tom Clancy that maybe you've never
Yeah.
heard of before. And be like,
Yeah.
oh, hey, look, there's my book. Who would have thought that? Yeah. But
Well, please do it. And then, man, report back and let me know how it goes. I'd be genuinely curious. Hey, even if it's a failed experiment, I mean, it's data point. For me, though, my experiences, you will get more opt ins and you'll get more click throughs to your book versus kind of just giving a chapter away for free or something like that, that a lot of people will download, but maybe never read. You could also include that at the end of that. Like, oh, hey, by the way, if you'd like access to number 5 on this list, here's the first 3 chapters, like a lead magnet to a lead magnet kind of thing. So play
yeah,
around with it and tell me how it goes.
I'll be interested if that'll even work on something like Storywords or Book Funnel. So I'll definitely keep you in the loop on that. That's interesting.
Please do.
Um,
Yeah.
yeah, man, I think that's all the questions I have for you. I think I've kept you long enough. You've got 5 kids to get back to, I'm sure. For anybody who
That's
doesn't know,
right.
you are a father of many.
Of
Um,
many.
yeah.
Yes.
So any last um any last thoughts or points or anything before we tell people where they can go check you out, find more about you, learn about what y'all do or anything like that?
No, you, Philip, you and Brian are awesome. I think everybody listening to this right now and part of this event, you're in the right spot. I think you got great people, great ideas, and you guys share great content. So, congrats on being here. I hope you got something useful out of this conversation. And if you do, let me know. I love hearing from people who actually listen to stuff and are inspired or motivated or got an insight. Like, shoot me an email, tom@tommorkes.com, TOMMORKES.com. Seriously, I love to hear from readers, subscribers, viewers. Any insights or thoughts you have on this, even the hateful stuff, like send it my way. It fires me up. So,
Yeah, the stuff most people don't enjoy getting, you do because
yeah.
you're
Oh yeah,
you're an ex-military psycho, right?
that's
That's
right.
right. Give me the pain.
That's
Um,
right.
so is that website, is that the best place for people to go find anything out about you? Just go there or any
I
other
think Tom
place?
Morkes is the best. I still do
Okay.
a lot of stuff in the publishing. I'm writing more about other things now than the publishing and writing, but like I said, it keeps bringing me back in. So I've gotten like a ton of feedback recently about what are my thoughts on publishing now? What would I be doing this year? A question about fiction and this stuff. So I got on my list to be publishing more stuff for writers and authors. So tommorkes.com is the best, and I'd love to see you there.
Yeah, man. Well, I appreciate your time. I know from experience of talking to you and being around you for a little while, you definitely know what you're talking about. So I highly, highly encourage people to go check you out. Um, I now know your last name is Morkes and not Morks, so I'll try to. Whenever I'm telling people I'm talking to Tom Morks, people are like, I don't know who that is. So yeah, go check him out. Thanks, Tom, for being here, and hopefully, I think most people probably learned at least one thing. I do always from these conversations. Like
Yeah.
I've got ideas, things I'm gonna go implement. and test out.
Yeah.
So I appreciate your wisdom and sharing all your cool tips and stuff like that. And just thanks again for being here, man.
Awesome, dude. I appreciate it. Thank you.
All right. We'll see you all in the next one.